Theo, it's May 12th, and okay, first, tail question. Hilarious. How did you think of that? What made you think of that, I guess? My answer, at least, and I want to hear yours too, but I would pick like a prehensile lemur tail, I think, because it seems useful. Like, maybe you could pick stuff up or, like, I don't know, hang from stuff. Like, that would be kind of fun. I would totally spend at least the first week, though, trying to figure out, like, how to live life with a tail. I mean, like, do you wear dresses all the time? Like, I don't know. Like, that's just, like, so funny. I think if I had to pick one that would be, like, most similar to just, like, my current experience with my physical being now, like, I'd pick something small and inconsequential, like a bunny tail or something. I mean, what other, yeah, something like that. Something chill, non-existent almost. Yeah, funny question. I love it. To answer your question about scale too, I did think a little bit about when I'm like intentionally employing scale as a, function of decision making, and something that surfaced to me as something that I do a lot, maybe out of habit now, but I definitely do intentionally when it's particularly important, is I consider, like, with something like time scale, I try to consider or suss out like the meaningful minimum and the meaningful maximum for whatever like variable this is. For time, for example, like, is this going to matter to me in 5 minutes, 5 months? Like, what's the maximum, 5 lifetimes from now, that kind of thing. I usually think, like, I recognize that I usually think with the anchor of my own lifespan, so I'm thinking in terms of, like, time from this moment now, between now and, like, when I die, but then, you can keep blowing that up as much as you want, like, 5 millennia from now. That's also out there. 5 was also totally arbitrary, but the reason I say, like, meaningful minimum and maximum is because, to your point about, like, infinity maybe being, like, a cop-out answer, that, like, anything's possible. At the same time, like, it's Schrodinger's meaning of life. Like, nothing is meaningful, nihilism, everything is meaningful, like, whatever. I think that in order to, like, move forward and actually, like operate, like, literally, in order to just, like, be able to execute on a decision, like, you have to accept some basic level of, like, recognize all these things, like, may or may not be there, but you have to find something, like, a meaningful range to operate within. Otherwise, like, you just won't do anything ever. So, like, I try to stretch the range and figure out, like, truly what is the meaningful minimum and maximum, and what makes those meaningful, and then sort of move forward with that, like, frame of thinking for things when I'm trying to think about scale. That's definitely more challenging when it comes to things that are less quantifiable. Like, I think emotions are a good example of that, but I also think that we have sort of arbitrary means of measuring those things. Like, you go to the doctor's office, they have those things that are, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, like, how bad is your pain? Side note, the, like, 10 face, always look at it. It's always hilarious. Like, I know that it's bad because they're, like, supposed to be in a lot of pain and I feel bad, but, like, they're always drawn. Like, it's so hilarious. And, like, when I think about things like that, for my lifetime, my 1 to 10 is only the pain that I've experienced, both physical and emotional. But it does help me sort of place, whatever decision or thing that I'm thinking about in relation to my own life. And then, you can kind of speculate, like, if you were to tack on various ranges based on other experiences, like, what that might look like too. But, again, I think there is just value in accepting that you may not always be able to define things to the degree of certainty or specificity that you would like, but getting too caught up in that, like, prevents you from acting at all. So I'm, like, not sure if that's even, like, there's always just a trade-off. I'm not even sure if that's, like, worth all of your time most of the time. So that was kind of interesting. I really liked your point about food, when you were talking about, like, something that makes you feel like a human versus an animal, and I think that's really interesting. I'm, like, taking an it's free online class that anyone can take. Is, like, the Human Odyssey to Political Existentialism, and one of the things that, like, they talk about in one of the early units is like, what makes us, like, uniquely human, what is, like, a distinct characteristic, and something that made, like, the reason that made me think of that is because you've clearly, like, made this distinction between human and animal, and one thing that they do in order to introduce this topic is liken humans to like all these different characteristics of animals, and then say that like, you know, if we're so much like all these different animals, like what is really the difference? And it's like maybe it is all of these things like existing, like all of these animalistic characteristics or characteristics that we share with animals, like all of those coexisting in one being is what potentially is, you know, like distinctly human. And I thought that was kind of an interesting like way of thinking about it, because like we've talked about this duality of the neocortex and the limbic system. Like I think you're right, it totally like comes to a head with something like food, and it's such an odd place to be, I feel like, just like as beings, to have all these problems that are so big and also so small. So of course, like we said, everything is about scale, but there's something, you know, we experience all these micro tensions between these different characteristics that potentially in other animals exist separately. Like the characteristics that we share with like an ant are different than the characteristics that we share with a monkey. The difference though is that like these two distinct characteristics that for ants exist exclusively in them and for monkeys exist exclusively in them, like have to coexist in us as one being. So it's kind of funny. I'm not going anywhere with this. I just think that was like really interesting, and I think that you're totally right that like food is a really great example of that. You know, this problem. I don't know, it's just like this problem. I mean, maybe it's not a problem. It's allowed us to do some like pretty cool stuff. So I think that's like cool. California is a great state also. I love, like, that was definitely my second choice. Like, not that California is a second choice. California is great. I think that like main thing, I actually see like Washington and California as like very similar because they have I don't know, maybe it's just the places that I've been, they just seem really similar to me, but I think that like I like the air in Washington better. Like, I don't know, like whatever, I'm not gonna like elaborate on that. I'm just gonna leave it. I like the air better. That's literally it. What else do I want to talk about? Oh, I want to talk a little bit about like this whole, you know, you can't know about the aliens thing, and like, yeah, it totally bugs me, right? Like, I thought that your point about trust was really interesting because it's true that so much of how we construct our realities is like through trusting other things, and we have to like, not only do we have to decide like what to trust, but we have to decide like how to trust it, like what we let that impact. So I think that like a consequence, or at least a result of that, is like we kind of figure out different patterns of underwriting that we're comfortable with different things. And one place that I've been thinking about this a lot is like politics, and like particularly like politicians like Donald Trump or like the president of the United States, for example. I think that what we've seen with the like coronavirus response is interesting because it seems to me that like people really value when you can point to somebody's political career and be like, they've always been this way on this issue, or they've always, you know, this. Like, I think it came up in, I don't remember what round of debates, but like the issues with busing and stuff, and just like, it occurred to me, and I'm sure people have talked about this, and like do talk about this, but it's like interesting that people put so much stock in someone who's always just made like the either perfect decision to them or like made the same decision. And the reason why I bring up coronavirus is because like it's like Trump has definitely changed his tone as things have moved forward with this, with the pandemic and stuff. And I think that it's interesting. Like, I'm not going to add too much commentary on like whether or not I think it's being handled well, because I think that's beside the point. Like, what I'm trying to evaluate right here is my preference to underwrite a person that I think can make a decision, like make the best decision that they can given a certain amount of information, and then also have the wherewithal to evaluate that decision over time, either as more information is made available or as the variable of time changes, of course, because like the longer that you know about something, like for something like the pandemic, time is a literal variable, and like things that we're assessing as time moves forward, it's like inevitably, like it's inextricable from how we're thinking about the rate of things. Like rate is inevitably, I mean, not even inevitably, rate is just like time generally for like this, I don't know, like this world, the math, the physics that we've decided on. And so I think that that's interesting as like a problem that, or people perceive it to be this problem that like someone changed their mind on something. And it's not to say that like I want someone who's going to be constantly changing their mind for fun, but I actually think that people over index for like people that have never changed their mind about things, because I think that it would be like, we would be remiss as a body of people to pick people that were so staunchly opposed to changing their mind that we thought that they would actually pick something for its nominal value, like a Democratic or Republican vote, versus evaluating a situation and, you know, speaking transparently about, like, here are some different approaches to this, here are the different pros and cons of these different things, and here's what I think is, like, the best, like, I don't know, plan or path of action given these different variables, functions, you know, outcomes. So, anyway, that kind of also ties back to this problem of just like lifetime, like people aren't in these positions, like political positions, like long enough to have that like time growth, or sometimes they're not in that position long enough. I was joking earlier about saying the Fed is getting trigger happy, but we're just printing money, like it's fine, but like, you know what I mean, like we don't have enough, like we're not alive for enough lifetimes to like feel this, or the people that are old enough right now to be making these decisions, like they're borrowing from tomorrow because they're going to be like dead presumably in like, you know, 5 decades or something. So I don't know, it's like, it's a confusing and odd time. But anyway, I hope that you're having a great Tuesday. I don't have like a whole lot else. We kind of covered a lot this week, I feel like, over text, which was also great. Good points. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about like this idea of framing insecurity as recognizing like emotional needs. I thought that was kind of, I mean, that's just like, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I guess lockdown, like you have all this time to think about not necessarily just emotional needs, but think about things in a more controlled way, because we have this like, I don't know, order to stay at home. Which, another side note for that, like I know there are people protesting. It's kind of funny to see everyone's response to like, you know, stay-at-home orders and stuff. Someone said that Seattle was like the most compliant city, which like I'm not really that surprised, but it's just it's a whole can of worms. People have some really strong opinions about it. It's kind of funny. It's just fun to watch, you know, like I'm just entertained by the state of things right now. And anyway, I hope that we like can get together soon and like everyone can hang out again soon. I guess that's like, I miss that the most right now. Not even just as like an extrovert that like needs people. I just miss the like casual being able to hang out with people. It's just so different than like, you know, Zoom calls and stuff. But anyway, I'll talk to you soon.